August 26, 1346. Arrows fell like snow in a storm so thick the sky turned black. Picture this. A blind king lashes his knights' reins together and charges blindly into death.
Subscribe. Comment which battle we should cover next.
At dawn on August 26, 1346, a pale grey light spread slowly across the field.
The air was cool, heavy with the smell of damp earth and late summer grain.
Across the landscape, two armies faced each other, one advancing, one waiting, both unaware that by night.
For weeks, King Edward III of England had led his army across France on a destructive chevauchée, a lightning raid meant.
The English army was tired, reduced by disease and desertion, but hardened by movement and discipline. Now stood with their back coast, searching for a defensible position. Behind him stood between 10 and 12,000 men. At their heart were English and longbowmen.
First among them were men-at-arms, knights and professional soldiers, dismounted by design, forming solid defense. The army was arranged deliberately, calmly, as if preparing for a storm they could already hear approaching. That storm was the French host. King Philip VI of France had pursued Edward relentlessly, gathering forces.
What mattered was the imbalance. France had more knights, more men-at-arms, more banners snapping in the wind.
But numbers alone do not decide battles. Fatigue, command, terrain, and timing often matter more.
The French army arrived at Crécy in disorder. They had marched hard, eager to catch Edward before he could escape.
Their pavises, the large shields essential for their method of fighting, lagged behind with the baggage train.
Philip hesitated. Chroniclers discussed confusion at the French command level. As the afternoon wore on, discipline gave way to emotion. The order was given to advance. A sudden rainstorm swept across the field. It was brief but intense. Just as suddenly the rain stopped. The clouds broke and the sun emerged, shining directly into the faces of the bowstrings were unwrapped and restrung, kept dry beneath caps and helmets. The longbowmen tested their drawbridge.
The genus crossbowmen were ordered forward. They advanced reluctantly, forming lines at the base of the slope. The shots fell short, or struck shields and armor with little effect.
Then the English replied. A sound rose from the ridge, not a shout, but a deep, collective creak.
Bolts and arrows are different weapons, and on that slope the difference was decisive. The longbowmen could shoot again and again, 10 or 12 arrows a minute.
The genos tried to reload, fingers slipping on wet cords, bodies already breaking formation. They advanced again. Arrows followed them. French knights, furious at what they saw as cowardice, spurred their horses forward.
The first great cavalry charge surged forward without coordination. Armored horses thundered up the slope, hooves churning the wet ground. Those who reached the English line found disciplined men-at-arms waiting behind stakes and shields, fighting on foot with axes, swords, and spears. Again and again the French charged. Each time the slope slowed them, the arrows thinned them, and the English formations held.
The battlefield became a killing ground of fallen men and animals, bodies piling so thick that later charges point. Word reached King Edward that his son, the 16-year-old Edward Stock, the Black Prince. Advisors urged the king to send reinforcements. Edward listened, then refused. The decision was real.
By nightfall, the French attacks faltered. King Philip himself was wounded and forced from the field.
When the fighting finally ceased, the scale of the disaster became clear. French losses were catastrophic. In the hours after the battle, the silence was almost as overwhelming as the noise had been. English soldiers moved cautiously among the fallen, finishing grim work, searching for comrades. Banners that had symbolized centuries of lineage were trampled into the earth, their vibrant colors dulled by the
King Edward ordered prayers of thanksgiving as he understood the scale of what had happened.
This was not merely a victory snatched from the odds. Edward had chosen the ground carefully, chosen to fight on foot, and chosen to trust common archers as much as noble knights.
As dawn rose on August 27, the battlefield was revealed in full horror, chroniclers describing the dead lying.
Horses, more numerous than the men who rode them, lay bloated and stiff, their armor crushed inward by arrows that had
The scale of the French losses shocked even the English victors, with contemporary accounts listing over 1,000.
The French defeat at Crécy was not the result of cowardice or lack of bravery, for individual acts of courage were abundant across the field that day. What failed instead was command, coordination, and a fundamental understanding of how the battlefield had changed.
The French army fought as generations before it had fought, with valor centered on mounted charges. News of the disaster spread quickly across France, towns closing their gates while lords counted.
King Philip's authority suffered deeply as he had survived the battle, but his reputation had not, leaving the French crown to face a renewed English threat.
Edward did not rush south immediately, for his army remained deep in hostile territory with supplies still limited.
The siege that followed would last nearly a year, but it was Crécy that made it possible.
Across Europe, observers took note as mercenary captains, princes.
The longbow was not a new weapon, but never before had it been used with such decisive effect against massed cavalry.
Yet the lesson was not learned evenly, for many European powers.
The English army, the victory reinforced a distinct military culture.
The Black Prince emerged from the battle with his reputation forged.
But beneath the triumph lay darker realities, for the battlefield remained a place of suffering long after the army's defeat. The 100 Years' War, despite its name, was not a single continuous conflict, but a series of wars, truces. England believed it could win through arms, while France believed it must adapt or be destroyed, both sides destined to bleed for decades. In military memory, Crécy revealed a battlefield governed less by noble birth and more by organization, logistic, and training.
And yet on that August day in 1346, none of that future was visible to the men who fought, who knew only the slope beneath their feet.
History moved forward not as an abstract force, but through the decisions of individuals. Rain washed blood into the soil as grass bent back toward the light, the names of most who died there never recorded. Crécy was not the end of chivalry, but marked the moment when chivalry ceased to dominate the battlefield.
From that field in northern France,
the battlefield of Crécy, once soaked in blood and silence, now stands as a quiet reminder.
The names of most who died there were never recorded in any lasting way, yet the consequences of their deaths.
Crécy was not the end of chivalry itself, but it marked the precise moment when chivalry ceased to dominate the battlefield as the decisive force in war.
It became the point at which war began to favor systems over symbols and preparation over pageantry.
From that field in northern France, the sound of the longbow echoed far beyond the 14th century.
And so Crécy endured not merely as a victory for one side or a defeat for the other.
that single day dismantled an old order of warfare based in birth and display. In England, the longbow rose beyond a mere tool of war to become a symbol of national identity. The Black Prince's conduct that day cemented his place in legend, his personal motto and crest.
Yet the human cost extended far beyond the battlefield, as ordinary lives in the region were shattered by destruction. The broader conflict persisted through cycles of fighting and uneasy peace, with Crécy serving only to deepen the distance.
Crécy offered a fleeting glimpse of a future where battles would be won not by individual valor alone.
This gradual evolution pointed toward the eventual emergence of standing armies. Ultimately, Crécy remains etched in history as a true transformation, a compressed period of intense violence that dismantled long. Today, the fields lie quiet under the same northern French sky, offering space for reflection on how
Crécy yours as more than a battle won or lost.
History never truly ends. Subscribe. Comment which battle we should cover next.